If I had to start from zero today, so I had no certifications, no experience in the industry, nothing, and I wanted to get into a cloud job as quickly as possible, I would do things very differently. Most people are spending months, if not years, going down the wrong path. So in this video, I'm going to help you to understand what it is you can do if you're starting from zero and you want to end up in a cloud job, perhaps working as a cloud engineer, DevOps engineer, or some similar job role. So the big mistake that a lot of people make is they're treating AWS like an exam, not a skill set. So they're focusing way too much on the theory side of things. That's watching lots of videos, taking lots of notes, memorizing services, and understanding how to pass exam questions, which of course is a good skill. You do want to get certified, but it's not enough on its own. It's not going to land you a job today. So the problem is you may be able to pass a certification exam after going down that pathway, but you might not know how to actually build anything in the real world. And that is the problem, and that's where people are getting stuck. They've learned AWS, but they still can't get a job. It's because they're not a builder. They don't know how to build on AWS. That is the key skill that you need. You need to follow a pathway that's going to get you into a job by building skills. So building hands-on skills that you can actually take into a company and you can help them to solve problems and perform operations and do the job that you actually get hired for. So if I was starting again, I'd definitely change my approach. I would focus a lot less on memorizing and much more on actually building. Now, I always have been a builder. I've always had labs of one description or another, but today it's just much more important than it was back in the day where I could stack up certifications, land a job, and then start building the hands-on skills in the actual job itself. Now, we've actually got to get those hands-on skills before we get the job. Even if you have a tech background, you've got to get the AWS specific skills that you need for that job role. So learning theory is not going to be enough. You do have to make sure you can apply it in the real world. So how can we do that? How can we focus our time to build the right skill set? Now, there's hundreds of services on AWS. What you really need to know for most job roles is a core set of services. So don't try and learn everything. It's just too much. You want to know Amazon EC2 and the related services like elastic load balancing and auto scaling, VPCs, the virtual private cloud, storage services like S3 and EFS, identity and access management, and some of the serverless services, including AWS Lambda. Those are the core services that are going to be used for building server-based applications and serverless applications. Now, there's tons more. There's some databases. You should certainly perhaps at a minimum know RDS and DynamoDB. I'd say those are the two main database services that you're going to come across the most. Other database services, you'll learn them as you need to, but those ones you can focus on for now. These services are really the building blocks of many applications. Now, make sure that you build projects early. So start learning, and of course you can use video courses to start learning, but also make sure that you do hands-on exercises and build some really interesting projects. So things like hosting websites on Amazon S3 and EC2, launching instances, performing actual scaling of instances using auto scaling based on perhaps performance or something like that. Creating APIs with API Gateway and then AWS Lambda, server-based event-driven applications. So build projects that kind of replicate what you'll actually be doing in the real world. The next tip I have is to learn how things connect together. So services in AWS don't operate independently. For the most part, what we're doing is we're connecting them together, often using APIs. AWS is all about API-driven access to the different web services that they actually host. So we're building applications that connect to each other, learning how they interface, how they send communications to each other, how they pass data, how perhaps one component of an application might trigger another. These are super important because this is how real-world applications actually work. You've got to understand things like the request flow. When requests come in, how do they get processed through an application? Where does the data get stored? And how is access to the application controlled in a secure fashion? So think like an engineer and then start looking at how end-to-end systems work together. So for example, if you're following a course, and like in my courses, I have many hands-on applications, for example, serverless applications where there's several components to it. Don't just build it and not sort of inspect it in a deep way. What you really want to do, build it, make sure it works, and then go and dive a little deeper into the different areas and really make sure you understand how things are actually connecting together. That is the difference that's going to give you the ability to really understand how things work, but also to troubleshoot when problems occur. The next tip is that it's essential to add supporting skills. So it's not enough just to know AWS. There's a few other technologies that you really need to understand. Now, Linux is one of them. So the Linux operating system is the most common operating system used in the cloud. It's very much a command line operating system. So you need to understand how to use the command line. So very good skill set to have is to just spend some time learning Linux. You don't have to be a guru, and you don't need a certification for most jobs, unless you're doing operational roles where you're going to be working extremely heavily with Linux. For the most part, you don't need certifications. You just need to know how to actually use it. So that's a really good one. Make sure you understand the file system structure, the basic commands, networking, permissions, and that kind of thing. Networking is another skill set that's essential to understand. Make sure you understand the different layers of the OSI model, how IP addressing works, how subnet masks work, how traffic flows through a network, and the different types of devices that we have, and how we control routing in a network. Now, in terms of certifications, make sure you use them strategically. Work out which certifications are most relevant to the job role you're going for and the level that you're applying for. For example, you don't need pro or specialty level certifications for a junior role. If you are going for a senior role and you're coming from a strong networking background or a strong security background, having the specialty in that area would be very useful. If you're an experienced solutions architect, getting the solutions architect professional is useful. If you're a less experienced, you're going into solutions architecture for the first time, the associate level is probably fine. So don't try and stack too many certifications, just get a few certifications that reflect the level that you're at and the type of job role that you're actually going for. So next, of course, is to build a project portfolio. This is how you're going to demonstrate your capabilities. So you've performed the practice, you've learned how to build on AWS. Now you need to make sure you document it in some way that you can show to employers. A couple of tips I have here. One is that too many people go straight to GitHub and think that they're going to upload their project to GitHub and that the employers are going to download it and run it and see their application and be super impressed with what they've done. The reality is most of the time that is not going to happen, and most people in the hiring process will not even understand what GitHub really is. You can use it, but also back it up with something visual and something text-based. So articles and diagrams describing what you've done. These are able to be interpreted by more people in the hiring process, so it's a bit more useful for you. So yeah, definitely do that. So have your project work, make sure that you have it in some format that's sort of applicable to the different people that are going to be reviewing your application when you go for a job. So just to summarize what we've covered here, if I was starting over again, what I would do is focus on building, learning the core AWS services that are the building blocks of most applications in the cloud. Really make sure I understand how things work end to end and how to troubleshoot and solve problems. And then I would get some certifications that align to the type of job role I want to go for and make sure that I build up that portfolio that I can use to demonstrate that I have hands-on capabilities that are aligned to the type of job that I'm going for. This is the strategy that actually leads to jobs today. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to our channel.